So, welcome to the 7+ drop card review. As always, we are going to be starting with the Soulbound cards, and then after we get done with the Soulbounds, we'll do the cards we can craft. So, yeah, let's get started on that. First up, Core Hound. He's a 7-mana 9/5. He's also a beast. Yeah. Core Hound's really not that good. Having only 5 health means he's pretty easily dealt with by quite a few things. There's Fireball, Kill Command, Holy Fire, like a Backstab, Eviscerate, or just any sort of combo like that. There's ways to deal with him in every deck, Starfire. Yeah. I think every class is a way to deal with that. So, yeah, he's just not that great a card. Because even though his attack is really high, his health is just so low that it is not worth it. So, yeah. Next up, Stormwind Champion, a 7-mana 6/6 who gives all other minions +1/+1. He can be pretty good in certain rush style decks. I don't know, Stormwind's kind of a weird card because it is very good, especially in terms of the potential you can get out of it, but in rush decks, he comes too late in the game to be super useful. In control decks, you don't tend to have a big enough board to make him super worth playing, and he certainly doesn't work in combo decks. So you have to kind of build a deck around Stormwind Champion. That being said, he's still a really good card, and if you don't have that many, you know, amazing high-cost cards, I would recommend using him. He is good, but yeah, that stat buff for all of your other minions puts his average value at around an 8/8 for 7 mana, which is good, really good. So, yep. Next up, War Golem. He's a 7-mana 7/7. That's it, a 7-mana 7/7. Not good because of that. No text, he won't have a big enough impact on the game. You might as well just play a Boulder Fist instead. You'll lose 1 attack, but you'll also lose 1 off of the mana cost. So, yeah. Don't use War Golem. Just don't. It's like with Core Hound and stuff like that. There's just better cards to use. I mean, technically he isn't bad, but he's certainly not good. That's it for Soulbounds. That was quick. Let's go into Craftables, because there's a lot more cards you can craft. First up, Baron Geddon, I believe at least. Yep. Baron Geddon. He is a 7-mana 7/5 whose text reads, at the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to all other characters. Yes, this does mean heroes as well. Baron Geddon is pretty useful as a card, especially in counter rush decks, because he just continually kind of clears the board and keeps it clear. That being said, it also means you're not going to be summoning your own minions because they're just going to die to Baron Geddon as well. So because of that, Baron Geddon isn't used all that often. He's also very late in the game to need that kind of board clear, which is his primary function. So you can use Baron Geddon in a deck. He's certainly not bad. But, you just gotta be cognizant of the fact that he's not going to always be the answer to aggro decks and things like that because he's so late in the game. And he certainly won't do anything to combo decks. He'll be okay against control decks, but most creatures have more than 2 health in those kind of decks. So, yeah. I don't know. He's still a pretty good card. It's kind of like with the Stormwind Knight. If you want to build a competitive deck with Baron Geddon in it, you have to build it around having Baron Geddon in it. You can't just throw him into any deck willy-nilly and expect him to perform. So, yeah. Next up, Ravenholt Assassin. He's a 7-mana 7/5 with Stealth. Seems kind of like Core Hound, but he's actually a bit better since he has Stealth. He's guaranteed to get off that 7 damage, and having 5 health means he'll survive quite a few trades. So, where Core Hound is not guaranteed to get off its 9 damage and could be dealt with by spells, this will at least get off its 7 damage. Or trade with the creature and then require another card to answer it. So, having Stealth means this guy will get much better value than a Core Hound. or at least more consistently. So, yeah. Next up, Gruul. He is an 8-mana 7/7 legendary with a text at the end of each turn, gain +1/+1. This does mean your opponent's turns. Gruul is kind of interesting, because once he gets going, you have to kill him when he comes out. And for decks that don't have cards that are straight up kill cards, like druids don't have kill cards, rogues don't run kill cards, and I think paladins don't have kill cards either. This card can be really difficult to deal with. Mages of Polymorph, Priests of Shadow or Death, Hunters of Deadly Shot, if you can get that off, or Hunter's Mark, Warriors of Execute, Shamans, Hex, and Warlocks have Siphon Soul. But Gruul will get out of hand really, really fast. So you're playing a card that you're telling your opponent, you have to deal with this, and you have to deal with it fast. Because of that, Gruul will usually get a lot of value when he's played, because your opponent needs to deal with him, or everything he does to try to kill Gruul will be ineffective. So, yeah. Gruul is just, he's alright. He still can be blocked by taunt and stuff like that, so he's not run in most decks, but yeah, okay, that's the way to phrase it, is he's just a really, really, really big minion who will be out of control. That being said, just playing a big minion this late in the game isn't always adequate. Sometimes you need the text to kind of create a win condition, and Gruul isn't run extremely often because he doesn't create that win condition when he's played. But yeah, he's still a good card, and if you get him, I would most certainly recommend you play him in just about anything but an aggro deck. Even in a combo deck like with rogues, if you played Gruul in a Miracle Rogue and you did Gruul plus Conceal, that would just be rude. It'd be so vicious. So yeah, Gruul's got a lot of potential, but he isn't played often just because he doesn't have the text to create win conditions, so I still would recommend playing him in a lot of control decks and certain combo decks that can make it work. But, yeah. Druid can make a lot of use of this guy. Anyway. Next up, Ragnaros, the Fire Lord. He's an 8-mana 8/8, whose text is, he cannot attack. At the end of your turn, deal 8 damage to a random enemy instead. 1 second. Sorry about that, dog's OP. So this means Ragnaros will just randomly start shooting enemies. However, because of that text also, he never takes damage for dealing it out. So when he starts killing your opponent's big creatures, you know, there's no punishment for it for Ragnaros. That being said, you have to rely on him kind of sniping out the targets that you want him to. So Ragnaros is an extremely good card, and he's used a lot in control-style decks, especially because since his text reads at the end of your turn, it deals 8 damage. This means he will do that the turn he is summoned, so he effectively is an 8/8 with charge. So, kind of like King Crush, but way better. And that's Ragnaros. I mean, you gotta rely a little bit on RNG for him, but he is an absolute monster. Yeah. Your opponent's only 2 ways to kind of deal with Ragnaros is to throw a bunch of small minions out there as fodder, or kill it really quickly, because Rag will eventually dominate. Praise Ragnaros. No. If you don't get that joke, it's from way back in Hearthstone. If you do get that joke, I'm not sure why you're watching me do card reviews, but I don't know. Thank you for watching. Next up, Alexstrasza, a 9-mana 8/8 dragon whose battle cry is to set a hero's remaining health to 15. This can be yourself or your opponent. Alexstrasza is really useful in certain combo-style decks, because you don't have to hurt your opponent throughout most of the early game. You know, you can just wait until it gets to the late game, and you've got your combo all set up. You drop Alexstrasza one turn and take your opponent to 15, and then just wreck them with your combo the next turn. Or if you're really low on health in the late game, you're around, 3 or somewhere dangerously low, you can use Alexstrasza to heal yourself up. Additionally, Alexstrasza is the funniest card to hear played because Alexstrasza brings life and that's what it sounds like when Alexstrasza is played. Yeah. Funny card. Interesting note, Alexstrasza is countered very effectively by armor, so freeze mages and warriors will absolutely wreck decks based around this card. Because, yeah, if you take your opponent down to 15 health and they've still got 10 armor on top of it, they're at 25, which is safely out of most combo ranges. So, yep. That's Alexstrasza. Next up, Malygos, 9 mana 4/12 dragon, with the text of spell damage plus 5. This means that Malygos, if he is allowed to remain on the field, basically spells certain death for your opponent, because you will just fling even the dinkiest of spells and deal close to 10 damage with them. One Frostbolt, boom, 8 damage. For 2 mana. Pretty crazy. That being said, Malygos' mana cost is extremely high, so you have to try to find a way to get him to survive for a turn. The most effective way to do this is if you play him in a combo rogue deck, and then drop Malygos plus Conceal, and then just fling spells at your opponent and wreck them. So yeah. However, Malygos is a rather awful card, honestly, in just about any other deck. Except Druids, I guess, because of Moonfire, but that's for a different time. Because again, he costs 9 mana, and he has to survive for a turn. On top of that, most decks are then built around him as the one win condition, so when Malygos dies, the game is lost. And when you play him, you don't have a way to protect him. That's why the rogue deck that plays him can work, because if you conceal him, your opponent has to find a way to deal 12 AoE damage. That's really hard to do. Really hard. Is there even a way to do that? Twisting Nether. There you go. That's your only answer to that. That is your only answer. Or a quality Pyromancer, or a quality Consecrate. I guess those both work too. But yeah. Anyway, moving on. That's Malygos. Don't use him. I have him. I was over-eager a while ago. Thought I could make a priest deck that would wreck people by playing Malygos and Velen. You can see why that would be ridiculous. You could do a Mind Blast for 20 damage, but both Malygos and Velen suffer from the same problem because they're so high cost. Even though they buff your spell's damage, you can't really cast anything once you've played them, so yeah, the deck was based around waiting 2 turns to get off a ridiculous combo. And that's never going to happen, so yeah, that's Malygos. Next up, Nozdormu. 9 mana 8/8 dragon, whose text reads, players have only 15 seconds to take their turns. Yeah. Nozdormu is a rather troll card because he hurts you with his text as much as he hurts your opponent, and that effectively means he's a 9 mana 8/8. However, most people who aren't used to playing against Nozdormu can be forced into making massive mistakes when he comes out onto the field. So it's up to you. I mean, most decks don't run him because he doesn't impact the game enough, and on the pro circuit, you know, they're often pretty capable of making their plays that quickly. As you guys will have noticed with me, I take longer than that because I have to think everything through. But yeah, that's Nozdormu. You're welcome to play him in your own decks, just because, yeah, not everyone's a pro, and so not everyone will be ready for a Nozdormu, forcing them to play really quickly. But yeah, you won't see him in any pro-grade decks because, yeah, good players are the counter to Nozdormu. Anyway. Next up is Onyxia. a 9 mana 8/8 dragon whose battle cry is to summon 1/1 whelps until your side of the battlefield is full of creatures. Those are the whelps. Yes, they're the same ones that Leroy uses. Onyxia is not used. Just why would you use Onyxia? It's a 9 mana 8/8, and any form of board clear, even a wild pyromancer with a spell cast, will completely obliterate the board that Onyxia summons. So these whelps are not threats at all, and you're then on summoning an, 9 mana 8/8. So I don't think I've seen a deck where Onyxia is used. The mana cost of the dragon also means it's too high to use in like a token druid style deck where you just buff all your minions with Power of the Wild. Since Onyxia costs 9 mana and Power of the Wild costs 2, you're either going to need a coin or an innervate just to get that combo off. And then you'll only have a bunch of 2/2 whelps which still die to most forms of board clear. So Onyxia is just not used because the whelps are way too weak, and then Onyxia's stats for the mana cost are not good enough. So if you find a deck to use Onyxia in that works really well, please let me know, but I've never seen one, so yeah. Best counter for Onyxia, by the way, is Pyromancer plus Shadow Word Death, or Pyromancer plus Hunter's Mark. Yep. Next up, Ysera. She is a 9 mana 4/12 dragon, and has the text at the end of your turn, draw a dream card. There are 5 different dream cards, and I will go through them. First, Ysera Awakens. It is a 2 mana spell which has the effect of deal 5 damage to all characters except Ysera. Yes, this includes heroes. Yes, this includes yourself. So, Ysera Awakens is a very powerful form of board clear, and is also a very funny way to commit suicide. Yeah, that's about it. Next up, the Emerald Drake. It is a 4 mana 7/6 dragon. Absolutely ridiculous stats for the mana cost. Ridiculous. That being said, it doesn't have any text or anything like that, so it's not going to change the state of the board the turn it is summoned. So this is a good card to get if you're in a position where you have board control, or at least close to it, and you're sure that your opponent doesn't have lethal. Ysera Awakens is a bit better to kind of clear out your opponent's board, and I don't know, you hurt yourself too, so maybe you might bring yourself into lethal range, but yeah. The Drake still. Fantastic creature. Next up, Dream. It's a 0 mana cost spell with the effect return a minion to its owner's hand. This can be good also as a way to stop your opponent from having lethal by just getting rid of minions. Yeah. It's also a good way to get rid of silence. So, that's Dream. Next up, Nightmare. Give a minion +5/+5 at the start of your next turn, destroy it. This does mean that Nightmare can be used to buff a creature with Taunt, and it will stay there in its super beefy form through your opponent's turn. That is a decent tactic to use. Another thing a lot of people do with Ysera is if they get Nightmare, which I always seem to with Ysera, you just kind of stockpile them until you have one creature who survives on the board. One sec. Nope, don't need that ringing. Sorry. You just stockpile Nightmares, and once you have one creature on the board, you drop them all on one creature. And it's basically 0 mana to deal 5 damage, as long as you have a creature on the board. So Nightmare can be really, really powerful for attaining lethal, and surprising the crap out of your opponent. So, Nightmare is not bad at all. Last but not least, the Laughing Sister. It's a 3 mana 3/5 that can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. This means that it's extremely difficult to deal with. It also means that being a 3/5, and after getting it with Ysera, you better hope your opponent's board is clear, otherwise the Laughing Sister will not be all that great. Because, well, yeah. It's only got 3 attack, it's not going to do much to change the state of the board, it's just going to go around hitting things. It also can't be targeted by Nightmare, so that doesn't combo that well. That being said, those are all cards you can get from Ysera, in addition to her being a 4/12 dragon, which is extremely difficult to kill. Especially having 4 attack, it's difficult for priests to deal with, and every other class, you know, it's got high health. So unless you're using like Shaman or Mage or Hunter, Hunter's Mark, change of minions, health to 1, and Mage and Shaman have the Hex and Polymorph. It can be difficult to deal with. I guess there's Siphon Soul and Execute again, but still, Ysera is just hard to deal with and will always give you at least 1 dream card, all of which are good cards. So, Ysera is an absolutely excellent card, especially in control-style decks. No, I don't recommend Ysera for combo decks, because you can't guarantee you'll get the card you want to pull off combos. And in an aggro deck, come on, dude, it's a 9-mana, 4/12 dragon. That's way too late in the game for a rush deck. So yeah, control decks Ysera owns. Any other type of deck, don't run Ysera. So, that's Ysera. Anyway, next up, Deathwing, a 10-mana, 12/12 dragon with a battle cry of destroy all other minions and discard your hand. Deathwing isn't used very often because, you know, he's your guaranteed last-ditch effort. Like, when you play Deathwing, if your opponent deals with him, you lose. That's just how it is. If you play Deathwing and your opponent kills it, you lose. The game's over. So, Deathwing's used in certain decks, control-style decks again, because Deathwing is too late for aggro decks, and discarding your hand doesn't seem like a good idea if you're playing a combo deck. So, yeah. That being said, Deathwing is extremely useful against other control decks, because if your opponent suddenly attains a massive amount of board control, Deathwing can just eliminate everything and become a big threat. But I personally do not like Deathwing as a card, because again, if your opponent kills him, especially the turn after he's summoned, you lose the game. Game's over. So, yeah, that's Deathwing for you. Next up, Sea Giant, 10 mana, 8/8. That costs 1 less mana for each other minion on the battlefield. Of the 3 giants, Sea Giant is the worst. Reason being, you don't want your opponent to have very many creatures on the board, and your opponent most certainly will not allow you to keep a massive amount of creatures on your own side of the board. So even in aggro decks, where creatures are a constant, Sea Giant will never be at a state where there are enough minions on the board to make him worth playing. So, yeah, that's Sea Giant. Next up, Mountain Giant, a 12 mana 8/8, which costs 1 less for each other card in your hand. This is one of the big cards that Handlock is based around, a type of Warlock deck that, you know, damages itself quite a bit and tries to, via doing that, maintain a big hand using Warlock's hero power. So, in a deck that tries to keep its hand size around 8 or 9 cards, this is a very cheap 8/8. You can get a turn 4 Mountain Giant off, and that's absolutely ridiculous. So, Mountain Giant's really good in certain decks that are played with the style of having a massive hand. Oddly enough, you won't see it played in most combo decks because, I don't know, they just don't tend to have a big enough hand, I guess, or something. And in aggro, it's certainly, you don't have a hand in aggro. You just drop everything on the field and run with it. So, you can't play Mountain Giant in aggro. And last but not least, Molten Giant, a 20 mana 8/8, which costs 1 less for each damage your hero is taken. If a Warlock gets down to 10 health, or any person gets down to 10 health, Molten Giant is free. If you get below that, it's still free. It doesn't give you mana back. Don't try that. Yeah. It is interesting to note with Warlocks that the Warlock card Lord Jiraxis, where you destroy your hero and replace him with Jiraxis, and sets your remaining health to 15 therein, that is Jiraxis' max health. He has not lost any health. So if you play Jiraxis, and then try to use Molten Giant will be back to being at 20 mana, versus if you were regularly at 15 health and it would only cost 5. So, Warlocks take note of that, and yeah. Also noteworthy, Alexstrasza does not have that same aspect. It sets a person's remaining health to 15, but it does not set their max health to 15. Their max health is still 30. They've effectively taken 15 damage, so yeah. That's Molten Giant. Again, good in control style decks. In aggro decks, he'll come too late in the game. You're not supposed to be taking damage in aggro anyway, because you're supposed to have tons of minions, a few of them with taunt. And he's not good in combo because that's not a combo style card. Like, combo's supposed to do a one-turn kill type of play, not summon massive 8/8s. So again, another control card, but yeah. So that's it for the 7+ neutral minion card review. And I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did not, send me some hate mail so I can ignore it. If you do have constructive feedback, though, I'm more than open to it. After the next patch, I will not be doing a new review of these cards. I will, however, do a review of the Naxxramas cards one day, and then probably the following day, just state my kind of opinions on how I think they will impact the game. So, yeah, that's it for the 7+ drop card review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching.